Hey everybody, I'm Suzanne Barrett Justis, and as you've heard me say before, sometimes inspiration for a painting comes in your own backyard. And one of the birds that I've painted a million times, and I don't get tired of painting them, is the Carolina Wren. And they're so busy in my backyard, and to the point where they come by and they scold you for just being in your backyard, or they come by to look and see what you're doing. You know, they seem very curious, and they're just fun. I love them. I love Carolina Wrens. And so in today's painting, we're going to do one of these little birds. And I kind of started off the painting before I even put the bird down and doing kind of a neat sort of background. And FYI, I just went ahead and painted a really beautiful pattern using a stencil onto the substrate that I'm using. And in today's video, the substrate happens to be an 8x8 wood, cradled wood panel that I painted with acrylic paint first, and then did the acrylic stencil. Used the stencil with acrylic paint, and then when it dried, I did the little bird. So let's go ahead and jump into that. And if you are my subscribers, of course, always thank you so much. If you're not, go ahead and subscribe, and know that this particular video will be available on Patreon as well. So let's go ahead and jump into a little Carolina Wren painting. Now for this little wren painting, and I just did a really quick kind of really bad sketch onto this, but I did use fine charcoal, so it won't really leave marks, so I can correct, if I need to. The way I actually prepared this surface, the substrate happens to be a wood panel. It's a cradled wood panel, and I did a coat of kind of a cream colored acrylic background, and just took one value up, just a slightly darker value, and stenciled on this interesting background. I just like to do that. It's just kind of fun. So that's what the substrate is. And the palette, our starting palette, let's see if I turn this off, if it makes any difference. Maybe it does. I have over here, this is the green gray by 12 shades of gray. This is the yellow gray by 12 shades of gray. This is gold green by Richardson. I have titanium white. I have unbleached titanium white, burnt sienna by Winsor Newton. I have yellow ochre by Winsor Newton. I have burnt umber, Van Dyke brown, and ivory black, all Winsor Newton. And that's what I'm going to start with, and I think that we should be able to knock this piece out pretty quick. Two more colors to the palette. I added Michael Harding's King's Blue and Sennalier's Natural Tint. And the reason I need to make some good grays that are not, I could have used probably some other gray, but I like to make some of my grays, and I'm going to use the King's Blue to do that. And for toning, if I need more grays and I'm just taking some of the colors I already have, I probably will use my Sennalier Natural Tint. So I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of King's Blue, a little bit of burnt sienna, and just make an interesting little gray color here. And it generally does make a pretty good gray, especially for bills. And I'm going to just kind of block in the area of the bill. As you can see, I'm basically blocking in the bird, and interesting enough, you'll also see that I go kind of off track here because the sketch that I did was a little bit too basic and too wonky. So I am going a little bit off track here, but it's okay. I'm going to work it out. It's all going to be just fine in the end. So you can see I'm mixing my colors, and I'm using a lot of the burnt sienna with the titanium white with a little bit of yellow ochre, and basically making a color that's very similar to a raw sienna, and watching where my light and dark values are. Now, the Carolina Wren does have a distinct black and cream colored stripe over the eye area. It's one of its marks it's a field mark. It's how you can identify them in the field. And yeah, so I'm just trying to go around that. Now you can see that the paint in the back from the stencil is a bit thick. So you saw earlier I was scraping it off with my thumb, and I continue to do that throughout the painting and just scraping it off. But I'm just generally blocking everything in and trying to zoom in a little bit closer so you can see how I'm blending the sides. I'm using a Eclipse pointed round to do a lot of this painting. I showed you what brushes I started off with, and I almost do pretty much the entire bird with this one brush. So I'm getting all the details in, and I'm getting close to where I can start laying it in. Showing you how I just keep the paint on the very tip. I only load the very, very tip of the brush, and that allows me to get that white highlight on the bill. And of course, you know how much I love doing eyes, and I really do feel that once I start getting the eye in, I already can see the bird and his little personality, and they are just such fun little birds. I do think these are the dearest little things. But again, I'm still using that same brush, the Eclipse round, and it's probably a number 2 that I'm working with. And because basically the chest of the bird is a buffy yellow, like a kind of a yellow ochre, because the coolness or shadow will make it look green. So I'm using a lot of the gold green that you see there on the right to do the breast of the bird. And I'm constantly checking angles. And of course, the nature of the wren is that it always has a very erect, upright tail. And so I will be going back and checking that too, getting those wings in and all the field markings in appropriately. Now, as I get the tail, I am switching over to a number 2 ivory. It's just an ivory filbert, and it just gives me a little bit of a wider brush to get in a wide space. And there I am. Got to scrape more of that paint off, just so I don't have that ridge in the actual tail of the bird. And, you know, I have to keep in mind that a tail is somewhat rounded. So even the brush stroke, as you can see, I kind of rounded my brush stroke just a little bit. And I'm putting the little side... it almost looks like little side lights, but the little light feathers on the tail. And again, when I start to get the detail in, that makes it fun for me. Again, using that pointed round Eclipse brush. And so you have to have the darker color on first so that you can use the light color on top and have it stand out. And you can tell I'm going quite impasto with my paint. One of the things that's kind of tricky about the background that I picked was a very light value, and I have to make sure that I don't have too many light values where the bird touches the background. So I'm always conscious about my values and really watching it. But love, love, love getting in the detail, and that's, you know, always the fun part for me. Going in with more detail. And again, using that same little pointed round, I'm doing the little bars on the tail. And I am working in an alla prima piece, so I am doing wet on wet, which does make doing some of this type of detail a little tricky without them being over blended. So the trick here for me is to actually load just the tip of the brush. And that's why you keep seeing me dipping. I'm dipping, I'm dipping, I'm dipping. I'm reloading my brush often because I'm working off the very tip of my brush. And that's how I'm able to not overblend. And overblending is always probably the biggest challenge for a lot of artists. If you have any questions whatsoever about anything I cover in today's video, please don't hesitate and leave me a comment in the comment section and I'll get to you as soon as I can. And I'm pretty prompt. More of the fun details. So I'm going to be working this throat patch or this throat area. And because my values are pretty darn close, it does help to have that paint be quite a bit more impasto and thick. And that's what makes this bird look like it's jumping off its substrate here. It makes him look feathery. It gives you the depth that is needed to create that piece. So I know I've got to put the stick in. I can't just have this bird floating in space. So I'm just I'm not going to be putting a lot of detail. And in my reference that I'm working off of for this little bird, there's all kinds of detail in this little stick. Lots of moss and really fun stuff. But because I wanted this to be fairly a limited palette, I'm using the same colors that I put in the bird itself into the stick. So I'm avoiding doing all these little, the details like the moss. And I'm going in with that same ivory filbert that I did when I worked on the tail, and just putting in all the highlights and all the fun stuff that still you can have a lot of detail without putting in everything. So I'm just blurring where the branch starts and stops. I'm not running it off the edge. I'm just keeping it super simple. And I got to put the light highlights in the stick, and this is what makes it so fun. Well, I got to get the feet on this bird, and since I am working in an alla prima piece, I am using a paint scraper, and I'm just carving out where I want the feet to go. And I'm going to go ahead and use a it's a Shiraz Rigger, actually. It's a Shiraz Rigger by Rosemary. And again, I didn't put any red down, so I'm using the colors that I already have on my palette, again keeping it quite simple, and putting in the legs. So I mixed the leg color, if you will, by just using burnt sienna and white. And I'm putting all the little details, the highlights in the little toes, all the fun stuff into this little bird's legs. But I know I'm getting close to the end. When you start just doing bird feet, you know you're about to wrap this thing up. Again, more fun detail where the little breast feathers come up over the shoulder of this bird's wing. That's the fun stuff. So here you start off with a little bit of a kind of a buffy color and start adding more white, and again going a little bit more impasto with the detail like that, and that just makes it really come alive. And I'm just kind of wrapping it up and putting the last bit of details and a little bit of yellows. I did fudge and put a little bit of yellow, Cad Yellow on there that I don't think I initially started with because I really needed that brightness in that part of the bird's chest. But yeah, it's getting close. Going in with a little bit more of the little brown in there. And the reason I did that was because that rump area the value was just too much like the background, and I had to put in something to delineate where the background starts and the rump starts. So I wanted to be able to kind of emphasize that a little bit more. And then you just start looking it over and trying to find out where more detail lies. And you know it's almost done. You get to the place on any painting where you have to ask yourself, am I done? Am I done? And I'm getting close. And we're about to knock it out, putting in the last little bit of highlights on the back of the bird, and I'm about there. I think I'm done. And there you have it, the finished piece. And here you have it. This is the completed piece. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to do. And actually the whole time to do this particular piece took me about 2 hours. And that includes even the background. And the beautiful thing about acrylic paint, as we all know, it does dry super, super fast. So it allows me to do the oil painting on top, no problem. And I'll let it dry for a while, go ahead and put a regular Gamvar varnish on it, and it will be ready to go. So I hope you enjoyed today's painting. And if you did, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're not my subscriber, please go ahead and do that. And know that today's piece will be available on my Patreon channel in its full length, uncut, really, really long video. So again, thanks so much for joining me. And from Kingsport, Tennessee, in my own backyard with our neighbor's dog barking, I'll see you. Bye.